Okay, so number 1, sketch the graph of each function. So arc cosine. So let's first just don't consider that. Don't consider it's a 3x. Okay. Okay. So arc cosine x. Now arc cosine x has a domain of -1 to 1. Because, cosine has a graph of something like that, right? So, and that's 1 and -1. This part's -1. So the domain, so the cosine had a range of -1 to 1, but in this case, our cosine, inverse cosine, would have a domain of -1 and 1, and a range of 0 to pi. Okay? So, okay, now that we know that, because we now have a 3 here, that would mean that our domain would be a third of what we would have had. Why? Because now as our x increase, it would be our cosine 6, no, I mean our cosine 3, and then our cosine 6. When if it was just x, it would have been just x equals 1, and then our cosine 1, x equals 2, our cosine 2. So it increased by like 3 times the original numbers. Okay, so our domain would be shortened by 1/3. So what would have been something like 0 to pi and 1, -1 to 1. So it would have been like it would have been something like that. Okay, it's not the best graphing, but it would have been something like that if it was just an x. But now that we have to make our domain 1/3, we'll do something like, no, we'll do 0.33, no, yeah, and then we'll say that's 0.33 negative. Okay, so that will be our domain, but our range wouldn't change because that's what our answers will come out as. Okay, so now we have a starting point from here, and then ending point from here, and then we'll still have this part as what? So if we put the arc cosine of So we know that cosine 0 equals 2 pi, because if we just graph this, it's like, that's 1, that's 0, that's -1, and then that's that's -1, okay, and then that's 0, that's 1, okay, so that is 2, alright, pi over 2. So what would be our 0 as x would be pi over 2 here. So we'll have something like that, yeah, as our graph here.